You're listening to the Business Consulting Buzz podcast at www.consulting-business.com. Hi everyone, it's Michael Zapersky here, and I'd like to welcome you to another show. Today we have Steve Gordon with us from Steve Gordon Marketing in Florida. Steve took an engineering consulting firm from $250,000 to $3.1 million in sales in a few years. Today he works with businesses to improve their marketing in a variety of industries. Steve, welcome.
Hey, Michael, great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, my pleasure. I'm excited about this. So, Steve, let's start off and talk a bit more about your previous job at that engineering consulting firm. What were you doing there?
Well, I started there fresh out of college and kind of wet behind the ears, not knowing anything, and had the good fortune to have a really great mentor in the founder of that firm, and very quickly kind of moved on to into a path to succeed him in the firm. So I had been there about 4 years, and he asked me to take over, and it was just an outstanding opportunity to kind of step into a bigger role really early in my career. But one of the things that really was a little bit frightening about that role is that we didn't know anything about client development at the time. And the phone kind of rang, and when it would ring, it was great. We'd get referrals and that sort of thing, but we didn't have any process where we could say, yeah, we did this activity and it got us a client. And, the firm was growing and was great, but really one of the first things that I kind of turned my attention to was, okay, we've got to have a more defined way, a more predictable way of attracting new clients. And so that was really my main focus in that business. We worked with folks in the real estate market and in land development, and it was a blast.
So let me ask you, Steve, so before you kind of carry on here, you moved in 4 years from pretty much out of college or university, as you mentioned, into pretty much succeeding the founder or owner of that business. What were you doing so well that within 4 years you're at kind of at the top position within a fairly, good sized company?
I don't know that I was doing anything particularly special, except that I showed up all the time whenever there was some new thing to do or new type of project. I wanted to be involved in it.
Right.
And I'd like to say that was really by design. It was just because I enjoyed doing a lot of different things. I got to spend a lot of time with the owner, and just turned out I was probably more comfortable doing the sales and marketing and business development side, which is where he spent most of his time, than I was doing more of the technical work. And so I got pulled along with him to do a lot of that. So I think most of it was just that we got the opportunity to spend a lot of time together and build a strong relationship. Okay, so
it sounds like over time you really positioned yourself, whether it was by design or not. I don't know. Was it by design? But it sounds like you were positioning yourself to really grow a trusting relationship there. And so I'm imagining, and again, tell me if this was not the case, that when the owner was thinking about moving on or what his succession plan would be, is that you were kind of at the top of the list with regards to someone that he trusted and thought that understood the business. Is that kind of how things went down, or was it different?
No, that's really how it worked. And
were there people more senior than you that potentially should have gone into that position before you?
There were 3 key people who had about 20 years experience, more than I had, and so there was some challenges dealing with that. But all in all, the transition went well.
When you say challenges, these are people that potentially maybe thought that they were entitled to it, or just were more experienced than you, so that they would have been the better fit for the position? Is that the type of thing?
Oh yeah, they I think anytime in consulting, when you're dealing with a group of professionals that have a body of technical knowledge, there's a lot of emphasis placed on the value of that technical knowledge. And I didn't have anything close to what they had in terms of the technical knowledge. And what I did have that they didn't have was the ability to develop new business.
Right.
And a lot of times for technical people, I think it's hard to recognize the value of that. And so there were some challenges there, but ultimately they stayed on. They were part of my team. We went forward. It was just, you bump into a wall and especially for me, as young as I was at the time, leading a group of people and not really knowing what I was doing and learning kind of under fire. It's always a challenge and an adventure.
Right. And so you grew the business, you told me, from 250,000 to 3.1 million in sales. Was that during the time, was that over the period of the 4 years, when you were, moving up the ranks, or was that once you assumed kind of the CEO position?
That was during that entire time. It was over about a 12-year period, from, a couple of years after I came on board, when I had taken more of a leadership position, and, through the time that I exited a few years ago, we were able to grow the firm, it just, I don't know that there's any magic bullet to doing that sort of thing. We started off fairly small and, just kind of built it brick by brick over time.
Right. And so, you grew this company, by a factor of, 10 or so. How did you do that? How did you, take this business from $250,000 in sales to 3.1 million?
Well, I think part of it is just luck, being in the right place at the right time, but part of it is that we spent a great deal of time, becoming seen as thought leaders in the industry and within our markets. And we had, some very specific niche markets, here in Florida, and worked really hard to get positioned as kind of the go-to experts for the technical areas that we dealt with within our kind of client and prospect community. And it took a few years to get to that point, but once we were there, it's kind of like you get to the tipping point, and you begin to get some momentum, and then business really starts to flow to you. And that, more than anything else, getting to that top position where we were seen as really true experts, was probably the key for all that growth.
I want to dig into that for a minute. Through that whole experience, what do you think, what did you really learn about marketing? And are there any lessons that you could share about what really worked? If we can get a little bit more detail here for a minute of specifically what were you doing that worked? Was it a mailer that you sent out or some sort of an advertisement, or did you attend specific, trade shows? So really, what were you doing that really was working the best for you at that time? And are there any lessons in that you could share, with consultants? So if you apply to now as being a consultant, is there anything that matches the two?
Sure. We can certainly talk about the things that we did that worked.
Sure. Let's start there.
Yeah. And there are an awful lot of lessons in the things that didn't work. But, the thing that probably worked best for us, that was our workhorse was going out and doing presentations and going to trade shows and conferences and, getting in front of our target audience and giving them something new to think about, and stretching their concept of what was possible. And that was probably the best thing that we did.
And sorry, when you say presentation, so kind of give us a little bit more detail. How did you set up these presentations? Did you have a list of people to contact, or how did you go about actually setting up the presentation?
Well, there were a handful of events that happened every year, that were targeted at our market. And we just made sure that we were in touch with the organizers of those conferences, that we got to know them, built relationships, made sure that we were on the agenda. They'd have breakout sessions as they do at most conferences, and we'd always put together a topic for those. And those were really the best business development things that we did that produced consistent results. There were some things that we did that, looking back, I kind of scratched my head, but it was outstanding marketing education.
Right. Can you give us a few examples of those that didn't pan out?
Yeah, the biggest one, and
sure.
I'm a little bit embarrassed to admit, but, we spent for a full page ad here in Florida. There's a business magazine that's kind of the monthly business journal for the state. And, we spent, close to $50,000 on a full page ad that ran for 13 months. And, we got exactly, and I know this number really precisely. We got exactly 0 leads from it.
And the goal wasn't just to build your image and that sort of thing, was it?
That wasn't the goal. The goal was to, fill the bank account. But, that was my, first big education in advertising, and one of the best lessons I've ever learned, even though it was a little bit expensive. But, the ad agency that we used designed a branding ad that was all about, our tagline and our logo and some, pretty picture from space of Florida. And there was no call to action, and there was no, real benefit for anybody responding to it. And,
right.
In retrospect, knowing what I know now about marketing and advertising, we'd never run it. But, at the time, it seemed like the thing to do. And I see a lot of consulting firms go down that route because they think, if we look really impressive, if we go to the trade show and we get complimented by, all of our competitors, all of our colleagues, we call them colleagues, they're really competitors. And, then we've got a good ad. But, and all those things happened with that series of ads, man. I have to tell you, my colleagues in other firms around the state would call me and say, I saw your ad in the magazine this month. Oh, it's awesome. And I just wanted to crawl under my desk because, I knew it wasn't working very well, and we had signed this contract. I had to sign a personal guarantee on the thing with the magazine because the price was so high, and we hadn't advertised with them before, so there was no getting out of it. And and I see that happen so often that our egos, and I see this a lot in consulting. We want to be like bigger companies. And a lot of times we're consulting with bigger companies, and we look at the way that they market and advertise, and we want to kind of emulate that. And my experience tells me over these last 10 years or so that that's the opposite of what you need to be doing. But
right. Okay. So you've shared with us, the presentation side was working very well for you. The large kind of image display ad wasn't working for you. Is there any direct lessons there of what you think a consultant could do when it comes to marketing that, that you found that was working? Like, could the presentation approach work, or is there another kind of marketing method that you were using that would directly relate to what consultants could do right now that you think would be effective?
Yeah, I think for consultants and professionals, one of the best ways to sell what we do, because what we do is really complicated, and most of our clients really don't understand what we do. And I think one of the best ways that you can position yourself as an expert, which is really, I think, required if you're going to sell effectively, is to do presentations. And whether that's a live presentation, whether it's at a trade show or a seminar that you organize, or a webinar, or a teleseminar, something that's more virtual, I don't think it's as important what venue it's in, but that you're perceived as kind of being at the front of the room. And, we're all trained from a very early age, and for the majority of our early lives, to sit in little tiny desks and listen attentively to someone who stands at the front of a room and presents some information to us. School teaches us that we look up to and respect the knowledge that teachers and professors have. And really, you're putting yourself in that same sort of position, and your audience is already kind of geared towards looking at you as an expert and someone to listen to. It's much easier to get your message across in that way than it is in just about any other means. Now, to get people there, and this is one of the things I work on with my clients a great deal, to get people there, to put butts in seats, as they say, there are a lot of other things that you can do. And we use all sorts of things, email marketing and direct mail and, internet marketing and all those sorts of things to get people into that environment where we can kind of, stand at the front of the room and control the message and explain why we're valuable.
Right. Okay. And I know, we're gonna share with everyone listening some additional tactics and kind of techniques and approaches that they can think of. But let me first ask you. So, you built this business into a success, and then what did you do? Did you end up selling that business?
No, we with the change in the real estate market, we looked at it and realized that it wasn't going to be as profitable and viable as we'd like it to be going forward. And so my partners and I decided to go and find other things to do. And I think that was a good decision, knowing when to exit, because the industry collapsed and there was a lot of carnage along the way, but we were able to get out successfully.
Okay, so you didn't, there wasn't some huge cash windfall, but at the same time, you didn't stick around too long and go into bankruptcy.
Yeah,
with it.
We didn't dump all the money in the hole. No.
Right. Okay. You told me in our pre-interview that when you went out on your own and became a consultant, that you were able to get some, initial business just through your local network. Who did you turn to, and how did that work? Give us a little bit more insight into, okay, now you've started Steve Gordon Marketing, you're a consultant. Who did you turn to, and exactly, what did that look like? What kind of conversations did you have with people?
Well, I had built a fairly robust, personal network of contacts in my local community here and around Florida. And when I started this company, I sat down and I made a list of the types of businesses that I wanted to help, and I wanted to focus really on professionals, consultants, folks in professional services. And so I just went down my list of contacts of who I knew, and started having conversations with them and explaining, here's what we did in this other company, here's how we did it, and are these challenges for you? And for some people they were, I had enough of a relationship with them that I was able to get those initial clients to kind of get things off the ground. That's always a challenge when you're starting something new.
So you reached out to the people that you had some sort of a connection with. Did you email them or did you call them? How did you kind of get that first initial contact going?
It's been about 3 years. I'm sure it was a little of both. My style tends to be more with people that I know very well. It tends to be more of pick up the phone and let's get together and have a cup of coffee or have lunch and meet face to face. And I had the ability to do that because most of these people were local to me.
And so when you then set up that time to have a coffee or to meet them at their office, did you go in there ready to pitch them on your grand idea of how you want to help people as a consultant, or did you approach it more just as a conversation? What did that initial conversation really look like?
Most of the time, it kind of took the form of here's what I'm up to next, and and these are the types of people that I think I can help, and we'd get into a conversation about, how their marketing was working for them. And it's interesting because with marketing, just about every business that you talk to is doing, something. Right. There are very few that sit there and don't do any type of marketing. And so I get questions from people a lot. What do you think about this? What do you think about that? And it would open up the opportunity to talk about what the real problems were, the challenges were that they were having, and then offer a solution. Right.
Okay. When we talked before as well, you said that worked, very well for you to launch your business, to get the kind of initial group of clients in, but also at some point that you kind of tapped your network, and that well started to run dry a little bit. Correct?
Yes. Yeah.
So when that happened, how did you go about getting more clients?
Well, I had begun kind of changing strategies a little bit just prior to that, and my main focus in that time and now has been to go out and build relationships with other professionals who have built an audience, built a following, and are talking to the same market that I'm talking to, and look for ways that we can help one another. This week has been a great example of that. I've got a colleague who focuses on the leadership side of business consulting, and so we both are targeting CEOs of companies that are about the same size and about the same industries, but he handles a different aspect of the business than I do. And so I hosted a webinar for him for all of the people on my prospect list, and he did the same for me to his list. It's worked very well for both of us. And that's been my pattern now for the last year or so. And that kind of got when I hit that wall, and I think every new business gets to that point. At some point, you hit that wall where what you did up to then to get started doesn't work as well anymore, and you've got to figure out, okay, what's the next thing I'm going to do to get growth, and so for me that was the next thing, and putting that in place has really made all the difference.
Would you say that right now is one of your top methods for getting new clients, is looking for these partnerships?
Yeah, that is the top method.
The top method. Okay, so let's. I want to explore that a little bit more because it's a very interesting concept, and I know it works well for many consultants. But many people also don't really know how to even go about it. So if we just look at the example that you mentioned right now of a business consultant that specializes in leadership, a colleague of yours, you have some areas that might cross over a little bit, but also different areas of expertise. So when you're approaching that, how does it actually work? You're saying that each of you is promoting the other person to that person's list, and you're offering a webinar. So you offered a webinar, an educational webinar, to his contacts, and he did the same for your contacts. And then what happens? So if someone, someone on his contact list wants to, hire you to help them with their marketing or whatever it might be, then does he receive a referral payment, or how do you actually work out the structure behind this?
It really depends on the relationship. Some people want that, and some don't. And and there are some people I've done this with that don't feel comfortable taking a referral fee or a finder's fee. I have no problem paying that to someone because it's essentially paying for advertising, and that's valuable to me.
Right.
But some people aren't comfortable with it, and that's fine. And they're still, just because we have a good, strong relationship, they're willing to do it, without any money changing hands. And so, and really, I think it's much more about the depth of relationship that you have with that person than how you incentivize them.
Right. And so when it comes to to actually paying out that referral or creating some sort of a referral structure, what would you say is kind of the typical that you've seen or that you've used percentages that that you pay to each person involved? Sure.
I have seen anything from 5% to about 15%, I think, is about the top that I've seen. And again, it just a lot depends on the individual relationship and what it is that you're selling and how profitable it is and that sort of thing.
Right, because I guess we can clarify for everyone listening that if you're doing some sort of a partner or an affiliate type of arrangement with someone and you're selling a product, whether it's a digital product or otherwise, the fee that you would take is much higher. Whereas if you're going to be providing services to someone, obviously much more time is involved on your part, and so the fee that you would pay to someone would be lower.
Right.
Right, Steve?
Right, but the dollars, even on that lower percentage, the dollars can work out much higher because with most consulting contracts, you're charging many multiples of what a standard maybe information product type arrangement would be.
Yeah, definitely. That's a really, really great point. So on that, there's a tipping point I think that most consultants reach when they get enough clients. They don't necessarily need to constantly go after looking for new clients, and instead, the clients are coming to them. Would you say that you've reached that point in your current business?
Yeah, I think over the last 6 to 9 months, I've hit that point.
And what did that look like? What was the shift for you? And how did it, how did you see that? Did you see it coming? And if you did, what did that look like? And how have things changed for you as a result?
It's not as though you wake up one day and everything has changed. It's very gradual. When you're moving from the mode where you've got to really be out and actively looking for clients, and you've done that for a while, it takes a little proof, I guess, and a little bit of time before you want to back off of those activities. But for me, it really started happening when I beefed up my email marketing, and I know we're going to talk about that in a few minutes. But that was kind of the big change. If you could go back and almost mark it on the calendar that was about the time that more started flowing to me.
Right. Okay. Yeah. And we are going to get into that in a few minutes for the action bite. So let me I'm interested in this, but when you talk about this shift that happens, so you said 6 to 9 months ago, roughly, you kind of started to see that change happen. So looking back from the time that you started when kind of going out on your own as a consultant, you put in a solid 2 to 3 years, maybe a little bit more potentially of hard work going after building up the business and trying to get clients. It wasn't, you didn't just make this happen in 6 to 9 months, right?
No, I mean, I see all the time the stories that go by where, somebody has launched a massive consulting business in, 3 months or 6 months or a year.
Yeah.
And they do happen. But I think for most, the reality is that it's a grind at first. And I even think for the people where you see those stories, they have probably had, maybe 12, 18, 24 months of some sort of struggle or build up to get there. Whether it was in their current, business or something they did before and they've just discovered a way that works really well to attract clients, or have some particular relationships that they built before starting a consulting business. Right.
It's like that saying, right? The overnight success is an overnight success, but 2 or 3 years in the making in this case, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, that's funny, and it's unfortunate that these days there's so many people out there making these wild claims, and I know it's been around for years, but it's with how easy it is now to put up a website and to do all these to start a business. The cost of getting into a business is so much lower now, which is great in some ways, but it also means that people are now claiming to be all kinds of experts, and there's all these crazy claims being made and hype, and some people believe in it, which is unfortunate, because the reality is that, as you just said, it does take a lot of hard work and time to build it up. But so let me ask you, because now that you've hit that tipping point and clients are starting to come to you and you're not having to go after clients as much, what has that done for you personally, like in your own personal life? How has that changed things?
Well, I sleep a lot better, that's for sure. Honestly, it's, as you're going through that initial building phase, and I don't know that I ever had any doubt that it would be successful, but it's just really stressful. You're working a lot. You're trying a lot of different things early on to see, to really get the messaging right with your ideal type of client. And so it's just, I think that time where you're going through that and iterating is just really stressful, because you don't yet know what works. And it takes a little while to get that message exactly right. And I think that's where most of the work is. We talked about seminars before, and I've seen over and over and over again with the clients that I consult with now that's a proven method for getting clients. But it doesn't work if you don't have the messaging right. If you're not really dialed into what problem your client has in their head that they want to get solved. And, and that takes some time and some interaction with the market, especially if you're coming, into it fresh. Right.
And when you say seminar, are you referring specifically to a seminar where you're there physically presenting, or this could be a webinar or some other online type of delivery method?
Yeah, it could be any delivery method. I use that term generically.
Okay, and I'm just for the old school people listening to this, we just need to clarify.
Sure.
Okay, nah, that's great, and thanks for sharing that, Steve. I think it's important. I appreciate you kind of sharing a bit of insights into how it's affected you personally. I know a lot of conversations around business are often just on business, but it's nice to get a sense into the personal side as well.
Sure.
All right, let's dive into the action bite for today. And you're going to talk about how you've started emailing your contacts every day, and it's actually been great for your business. So tell us about that.
Yeah, most people I explain this to think I'm nuts because I send an email every weekday to all of the people that are on my list, and I came across a guy I don't know 18 months ago or so named Ben Settle, and he's kind of an internet marketing guy and specializes in email marketing, and he really advocates doing daily emails, but really more for people who are selling, like an information product.
Right.
And I kind of took that information and attempted it about 18 months ago when I first came across it. Didn't really work very well at the time, and came back around to it, I guess about 9 months ago. And it has, the way that I'm implementing it now has just made all the difference. And I'm not saying that the people listening to this ought to email every day. I think you should, because, and we can talk about why I think that, but I guarantee you're probably emailing or communicating with your potential clients a lot less frequently than you could. And I have found that the frequent communication, the very frequent communication, has really been the key to building some solid relationships with people through email. I think it's a very intimate medium. You wouldn't think so because it's through the internet and you're not talking like we are now. But I think it's a very intimate medium, and I joke when I give seminars and workshops that about the only way that you could get into my front pants pocket if you're not my wife is to send me an email, because that's where I carry my iPhone. And that's about as personal as you could get with me, right? So, I mean, you get in this space where you're past the gatekeepers. You can reach someone because of smartphones in the evenings, on the weekends, wherever they are. It's a really intimate space for us. So I think that, combined with communicating and giving something valuable to your potential clients on a daily basis, I think is really valuable. And I've heard it compared to the relationship that a talk show host has, like a radio talk show host has with their audience. And, talk radio is one of the best selling tools that there is, because when the host comes on and pitches some service, they have such a strong relationship with all of the listeners, because the listeners show up every day at, whatever certain time to tune in and have that person in their lives. And that's really what my daily emails are doing with my prospects. And I get great feedback from them. I was a little bit afraid that I'd have a lot of unsubscribes. I actually have fewer unsubscribes now that I mail more frequently, fewer per week than when I mailed weekly, and then before that, bi-weekly.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, so that's interesting. It's like you're talking about almost the Oprah effect, is you're not having the Steve Gordon effect, by sending stuff out daily. And we tend to send emails out, twice a week. So for everyone listening to this, if you'd like to be receiving more emails from us on a more regular basis, shoot me an email at mike@consulting-business.com, and I'd love to hear from you about that. So, Steve, let's keep digging into this here a bit. You said that initially, when you kind of came upon this idea of sending emails out on a daily basis, that it didn't work that well for you. Why didn't it work that well for you? What were you doing different then that you're doing now?
When I first attempted it, I was still in this mindset of really in each email trying to teach something. In my case, teach about marketing. If I was a leadership expert, maybe teach some leadership principle. Right. And what I've learned is that's really not the right approach for a couple of reasons. One, you can give away so much information that you get to a point where your prospects can't implement the things you've given them already. So there's no need for them to go further yet until they implement those things. The other part of that was the emails were a little bit dry because they were all centered around a tip or this or that. So when I started up again, I started with the idea that they would be shorter. And so they're down to around 150 to 200 words. They're really, really short. They are a combination of maybe a small tip, but not a lot of meat to it, but just something to get people thinking, and some opinion. A lot of times it'll be an observation. And so, for example, the email I sent out today, which has resulted in 4 people requesting one-on-one, sales appointments essentially with me today. It was about an observation I made talking to 3 prospects earlier this week, that the problem that they were having, and I see this over and over again, the problem they were having wasn't that they didn't know how to market, it's they didn't have the confidence that the idea that they had to market and grow their business was, going to work for them. So they held back and they didn't do anything. So I wrote about that. Well, that clicked with people apparently because I've got, I've gotten a bunch of feedback from it. And so it's those sorts of things, talking about really the underlying problems, not the surface level, here's this tactic or that tactic, but the underlying problems that people are dealing with. And they're not always about marketing. Sometimes they're about other issues that come up in business.
Right. Okay. So that covers the difference of what you were doing before. You were much more focused on marketing and tips, and tactics. And now you're kind of looking at more, in some ways, I guess it could be almost a more personal or a human-centered approach, and looking at some of the underlying causes or issues or the psychology around things and observations that you're just making on a daily basis. Right.
Yeah, that's exactly it. One thing I want to, add to this idea of frequent communication is that the thing that it has done for me is it's given me a whole lot more turns at bat. To use a baseball analogy, instead of, in some cases I see companies that are, they're emailing or sending a newsletter monthly or, every other week, some just quarterly. Right. If you're sending a monthly newsletter, you've got 12 chances to move someone from that newsletter, from that communication over to, whatever the next step in your sales process is. I've got like 200 a year.
Right.
You can't not, to use a double negative, you cannot improve. You've just got more chances. You're going to, even if you've got a really low batting average, you're going to get more hits.
And do you find that, I know you said that overall your unsubscribe rate is lower now than it was before when you were sending less frequently. Do you see, even on that first email or the first couple, that there's a bit more of a drop-off? I mean, do you set the stage so that people know that you're going to be sending them something every weekday, or does that just sign that they start getting emails and they kind of figure it out and they must like it because they stay with it, or how does that work?
No, I recommend you let them know up front.
Okay. So you tell them, okay, I'm going to be sending you something every weekday.
Right. It's
okay.
In the, where they sign up for it, if they sign up on my website, the forms on the website all say, you'll get, my daily email.
Right. And how about the actual technology setup for this? Are you, because I mean, a lot of people that are going to be listening to this are going to be thinking, okay, well, yeah, that makes sense. I understand the batting average thing and all that kind of stuff, but that's a lot of work. I mean, even if they're short emails, writing every single day, I mean, for some people to write, one article a month is hard. You're writing, some kind of content on a daily basis. So are you writing and then scheduling them into an autoresponder so that, if you have a good kind of run at the mound per se, and you get a lot out there, that you can then just queue it up in the autoresponder, or are these emails actually going out like you write it today and only the email that you're writing today is going to go out today? I mean, are you setting them in an autoresponder, or are you just kind of broadcasting them out on a daily basis?
Well, do you want the optimal way to do it or the way that it actually happens?
let's hear both. I want to hear both.
I'm sure the optimal way to do it is to schedule them ahead of time, but
Okay.
and occasionally I'll do that where I'll get a little bit of time and have 4 or 5 ideas, and I'll go ahead and flesh them out. But what I did when I started this 9 months ago is I said, okay, time is limited, so I've got 20 minutes to write it and 10 minutes to set it up to go out. And I stick to that. And
do you have a set time when you do this every day?
It tends to be in the evenings, but there are days when it doesn't happen in the evenings, and first thing in the morning, for 30 minutes I'm writing an email. So it just really depends on scheduling. And actually, what I found is that it's easier to write a little bit every day than to sit down and try and write an entire week's worth, and spend 2 hours doing that. And for the people who would think, gosh, writing every day would be really hard, it's like working out at the gym. You're all you're doing is training your brain, which is a muscle. You're training it to crank that out every day. So after doing it for about 3 or 4 weeks, it really gets to be pretty easy to crank out 150, 200 words and be done and move on. And then at the end of every email, and this is really critical, the end of every email, there's a link for the reader to go and request a one-on-one initial meeting with me to talk about working together. And if you leave that out, the strategy won't work as well for you. But that's really critical.
So you have that's kind of the only real sales message per se that you have in each email, but it's in every single one. And is it located just at the bottom, like below where your name would be, or where is it located in the email?
It's usually toward the bottom, and I found that works better because I try and write the emails as many stories, and so the best way to do it is to tie the story somehow into the results that you help people get. And not all of the results, but pick a result for each email and tie the story into that. And so it's just sort of the logical next step at the end of that email. If somebody's read all the way down to the bottom and you've talked about this particular problem and kind of, maybe here's what to do about it. Then the next logical step is, well, if this is a problem for you, you need to meet with me. And here's how you do that. You click here and it takes you, or you could say, reply, if you don't have a website set up where you could, have them apply online, they can just reply back to you.
Well, Steve, thanks for sharing that tip. That's a great one, and also for being so generous and sharing your story with us and giving all of us here, including myself, a lot to think about. So thank you again. It's
been my pleasure, Michael. Thanks for having me.
For more interviews, articles, and resources on consulting, visit Business Consulting Buzz at www.consulting-business.com.